Well, so there you have it. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has rejuvenated his government. 9 new individuals have been inducted into the Council of Ministers and 4 incumbents have been promoted because of their performance. Piyush Goyal, Nirmala Sitharaman, Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi and Dharmendra Pradhan have now become cabinet ministers. We were just seeing live footage from Rashtrapati Bhavan where President Ramnath Kovind was administering the oath of office for these 9 individuals. Many would perhaps use a cricketing analogy this morning. Many would believe that the BJP government is now in the slog overs with 2019 just around the corner, and what they want are individuals who can finish the innings with an impact, with an eye on the 2019 elections. But is this enough? Because remember, we are still awaiting, the portfolio reshuffle. We know who the new ministers are, we know who the new cabinet ministers are, but what portfolio they are going to get is still far from clear. We are told that it will be released soon after the oath-taking ceremony, which has just concluded. But is this enough now for Prime Minister Narendra Modi to rejuvenate, revitalize his party ahead of the 2019 elections? We have a whole host of guests lined up to answer that precise question. Representing the BJP, we have spokesperson Narendra Taneja. Salman Soz of the Congress will also be reacting to that cabinet reshuffle. We have well-known psephologist Mr. Yogendra Yadav also on the show. And to get us a corporate perspective, a corporate reaction, we have Mr. M.S. Unni Krishnan, who is the CEO and Managing Director of Thermax. Individuals, thank you very, very much for joining in on this Sunday morning. Big day for the Prime Minister Narendra Modi government, where many believe this is going to be the last cabinet reshuffle before the big 2019 elections. Let's go across and get a BJP response first. Mr. Narendra Taneja, thank you very much. As I said, we are still awaiting, sir, the precise details of the portfolio reshuffle, as it were. But but many sources are telling us that there is unlikely to be any change as far as the top 4 portfolios are concerned. What is the larger message being sent out by Prime Minister Narendra Modi with this cabinet reshuffle exercise, sir?
Well, the message is very clear. It's just to ensure and further improve the quality of delivery, because delivery is the main mantra, is the main word, and is the main commitment to the people. And of course, this Prime Minister prerogative, and at the same time, as you know, along the way, you review as the Prime Minister, as the Chief Executive of the government, and you review if you feel that, look, if I need to reshuffle a bit in order to make sure that I sustain the same quality of governance, and at the same time, if I need to improve in certain area and certain quarters, certain corners, and certain parts. So that's what's precisely happening. And as you can see, look at the quality of people who are being brought in now, and also the quality of people who are in the existing or who were in the existing, Council of Ministers. So it's just effort in the same direction. As you know, there is no dearth of talent in the party. Party is very blessed in terms of talent in governance, talents in all kind of things that's required to run a country. And so Prime Minister just making use of it. Every single person who's being brought in, irrespective of their background, whether IAS, IFS or IPS and all that, are members of the BJP. So they're politicians. Most of them have also already contested the election. So focus is more on that, to basically tap into the pool that's available in the party and bring them forward, and and to make the best use of their talent in the interest of the commitment and the interest of the nation. We made a commitment in 2014, and determination and focus is only how do we deliver on that.
So you're saying there is no dearth of talent, but again, as I said, there's all source-based information. We're still awaiting the final allocation of portfolios. But with the indication and the message that at this point in time is becoming clear is that there is unlikely to be any change in the top 4 sort of, positions in the government. Many of your detractors would say, this is proof of the fact that the Bharatiya Janata Party has limited bench strength. How do you respond to those detractors?
You see, there is enough, party in the talent. Actually, we can run 10 similar Council of Ministers if required. So there is no dearth of talent. But when it comes to certain portfolios, you see, first of all, let's not forget, we work as a kind of collective leadership. There is a collective leadership. And the second thing is that, when it comes to certain portfolios and all that, it's again, it depends. Look at, for instance, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Defense. Mr. Jaitley has handled it so beautifully, so well. Just look at the results. So it does really matter whether, you have the one person handling 2 key portfolios or not. It depends on the the quality of the person, it depends on the quality of work that's being done. So as I said, our focus is on delivery. Don't judge by just the name. Just look at the delivery. Look at the delivery Ministry of Finance. Look at the delivery Ministry of Defense. For that, Ministry of Power, Ministry of Renewables, Ministry of Petroleum, and the list just goes on. So as I said, this is not a party where we focus on families and people and individuals. We focus on delivery and the organization as a whole, council and minister as a whole.
All right, you're emphasizing a lot on delivery, and perhaps that is also one of the reasons why we're seeing, fresh blood in the Council of Ministers. A lot of people have had illustrious careers in the government now being brought in, perhaps, with the focus on that last mile delivery. But before I bring in Mr. Yogendra Yadav and Mr. Unnikrishnan also into the conversation, let's get a quick reaction from Congress. Mr. Salman Soz joins in this morning. Salman, thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. How is Congress looking upon the developments since yesterday evening? Because the list was out. How do you see this? How significant is this cabinet reshuffle?
Mr. Taneja talked about delivery. Yes, this government has delivered 5.7% GDP growth to us. They've run this economy into the ground, and they're talking about delivery. They're talking about talent, by the way. The Defense Ministry we've had a part-timer in the Defense Ministry for half the tenure of this government. They have two people, there are 340 MPs right now in NDA, and they got two people who are not MPs at all. That just tells you about the talent this party has. I'm really shocked at how Mr. Taneja and all these people talk about performance. If you really want to hold people accountable, it should start at the very top. The Prime Minister runs this government on his own, okay? Your Minister for External Affairs, now they got Mr. Hardeep Puri, and now people are saying that he could be another state minister in the MEA. The MEA, the Minister for External Affairs, has been relegated to a position of a desk officer on Twitter. She has no real role on policy, on external affairs. I'm really sorry. The finance minister, for example, he's managing public finances, but not the economy. He always talks about taxes. I've never seen a country celebrate taxes as much as Mr. Jaitley wants us to celebrate taxes. But he's forgotten about the economy. Frankly, I had forgotten that Rajiv Pratap Rudy was a minister in this government. We don't even know the portfolios of most of these ministers who exist. He can get as many new faces as, Mr. Anand, he's the guy who beat up a doctor in January. In 2017, CNN, today CNN 18 put out this video of him beating up a doctor. I mean, these are the kinds of people. They're people with criminal cases. Look, nothing will happen because of this. Mr. Modi controls his government. He should take responsibility for the failures of this government. Yesterday, Bhupendra Chaubey told me that this government is about, this reshuffle is about 4 Ps. Passion, political acumen, blah, blah, blah. Indians are bored to death of this acronym business. This is a government of 4 Fs, as I said yesterday. Fail, fail, fail,
Salman.
Fail.
All right, Salman. I mean, it's fair for me to bring in Narendra Taneja to quickly react to some of those comments before I go to Mr. Yadav and Mr. Unnikrishnan. Mr. Taneja, go ahead.
Just three quick points. He was talking of part-time foreign defense minister and all that. India, during UPA 1 and UPA 2, had part-time prime minister. The world knows it. Part-time prime minister, the real prime minister was Mrs. Sonia Gandhi. Number 2, don't speak over me. This is, Mr. Soz, be civilized. You're a civilized person. Listen to me. Listen to me. Second thing is, you talked about part-time.
We are a business channel, gentlemen. We are a business channel. We don't believe in shouting at each other. So let's keep it civil. Please, Mr. Taneja, go ahead.
Yeah. And second thing, he's talked about GDP. Yes, this quarter we have seen what we have seen, but wait for next 2 quarters, and Mr. Soz will be forced to withdraw his words. Just wait for 2 quarters. Third thing, he talked about Sushma ji, the foreign minister. I think he was probably, he's a very nice person, Mr. Soz, but I think you have not been fair today. Mrs. Sushma Swaraj has been one of the finest foreign ministers. Just ask the people of India. And that includes the Congress workers across the country. Maybe a couple of people not in your party, but people know the wonderful job that she has been doing as Minister of External Affairs. And so please review your words if you can, Mr. So. You are one of the very few nice gentlemen spokesperson of the party. So I hope you will review it, at least internally, if not on CNBC 18.
All right, Mr. Taneja. Mr. Salman, just hold your horses just for a bit. Let's get in Mr. Yogendra Yadav. Mr. Yadav, help us understand the politics behind it, because as far as the new inductees are concerned, we have 3 Brahmins, 2 Rajputs, 1 Dalit, 1 Jat, 1 Christian, 1 Sikh. Help us understand the politics behind the announcements that the government has made.
Ronaja, this is the usual stuff that's done. My own sense is that this is the kind of a change the government is expected to bring. And if you don't do it, people will say, oh, you did nothing. But other than that, I really don't see anything to be excited about what has happened today. Anything that's different, anything that can promise anything, a major change. Of course, as you rightly pointed out, we have to wait for the portfolios to be announced to see if there's any major change. But frankly, there's very limited things that could have been done, given the very serious talent dearth, which is not merely an accident. The real fact is that people of a certain stature and standing in public life are wary of touching this party, whether these are intellectuals or people of a different, those who have certain standing in public life. That's a limitation BJP has always worked with. They don't want to touch this party. And the second limitation, self-imposed limitation, is that it's a one-person cabinet. So really, honestly, the names of these people don't matter in a cabinet where the External Affairs Minister does not decide the foreign policy, where some of the biggest economic decisions were taken probably without quite consent of the Minister of Finance. What else do you expect? So honestly, I would have found, purely in terms of policy, if the PMO was reshuffled, if some of the key secretaries were reshuffled, I would find it more significant in policy terms than what we have witnessed. The real question we should be asking is, does it address the challenge the government faces? In the last 1 month, we have seen 2 developments. One, there have been several polls which have reconfirmed that the government is popular. So the government is doing well in terms of popularity. On the other hand, we've seen many indications which show that the performance is lagging. Whether it's Gorakhpur or Panchkula, both are state subjects but would reflect on the central government, or the demonetization figures and GDP figures. I'm sure Mr. Taneja was not cracking a joke. It must have been inadvertent. But he said, look at the results. And I actually wanted to laugh and say, yes, look at the results. Look at the data that's coming out in the last 1 week. Has the government addressed that? This could be an inflection point, and one would have expected the government to do something better. I don't see that happening.
Okay. We'll keep coming back to you, Mr. Yadav, but let's also bring in A.K. Bhattacharya, who's joining us now from Business Standard on the phone line. Mr. Bhattacharya, thank you very much for joining in. I used a cricketing analogy at the start of the show, saying that, the BJP, the government now is in the slog overs, and they want finishers who can finish the innings with an impact with 2019 elections around the corner. With what we know, because again, as I said, we do not know what the portfolios will be eventually. Hopefully the announcement will come sooner rather than later. But with what we know in the public domain, the information we have, is this enough to pack a punch?
Well, I'm a little disappointed the kind of the information that is flowing out of the government on the kind of reshuffle that one is going to see. But let me, explain the significance of the decisions that seem to have been taken and communicated to the media so far. The 4 ministers of state with independent charge are going to be elevated. Now, if you look at these ministries, these are minority affairs, commerce and industry, power and power coal and petroleum and products. Now, I don't see any of these ministries, the new cabinet ministers in charge. Essentially, what you're doing is that the cabinet is going to be expanded, and these ministries will continue to function as independent ministries. Now, this clearly shows 2 things. One, there is no restructuring of ministries, making mega ministries to make governance more smooth and efficient. So that expectation is gone, which means in the key ministries of whether it is transportation, whether it is energy, that one had hoped that they will be able to merge all these ministries into one. There are about 3, now there are going to be 4 different ministries pertaining to industry in the cabinet. Now, clearly the hope that one had that it will be a kind of restructuring of ministries to make and fulfill the government's promise of minimum government and providing maximum governance, that hope has been denied, number one. Number two, it does serve a political purpose because you have given, for the first time in the life of this government, a cabinet status to the Ministry of Minority Affairs. Now, I think this is clearly aimed at trying to broaden the political appeal of this government by elevating Mr. Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi, who is in charge of Ministry of Minority Affairs and Ministry of State in the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs. So give him a rank of the cabinet ministry, so cabinet level. So therefore, there is a political act in my view. And finally, what I would say is that if you look at the number of the four technocrats they've been taken, is in my view is a good move, because you are trying to bring in a fresh talent and also admitting that the BJP within itself had some sort of a talent deficit. But if you look at the age profile of all these new inductees, they're all below 65 years. So it's going to be a young, young people are getting inducted relatively. They are all below 65, and you have got some fine, former bureaucrats, former diplomat, and so I sense that this is a mix of. Still, you get to know who gets the railways and who gets the defense ministries. I mean, you would not your comments will be reserved to that extent. Once those decisions are taken, probably more views can be expressed.
Yeah. In fact, all indications as of now, Ikubi, that suggests that that there will not be a bifurcation. I mean, Arun Jaitley will continue to be the defense minister as well, even though he's publicly, of course, recently said that how he would hope that that responsibility, that he doesn't have to wear two hats at the same time. But that's the information we have. But again, we do not have the full picture just yet. But let's get a corporate reaction going. Mr. Onikrishnan, please join in on the conversation. You know, Salman made an important point. The fact of the matter is GDP did slump to 5.7%, and this is the lowest that we've seen in the last 13 quarters. Private investment from the corporate sector is at an all-time low. It's hovering around 26-27% to GDP, down from 34-35% as we've seen in the past. You know, one was hoping that with this cabinet reshuffle, the government will be able to infuse new energy in governance, and so any real takeaways as far as the corporate sector is concerned, Onikrishnan?
Well, I want to first compliment the Prime Minister, because this is the first time I'm seeing a performance culture being brought into the governance of the country. So there is a promotion for four of the better, at least I can say that three of whom are personally known to me have performed extremely well in the Commerce Ministry, in the MNRE, the coal and the power, and also the oil and gas. They're getting elevated to the next level. And also asking some of the non-performing ministers to go away. This is the first time in this country which has happened at the central level. So it's happened in some states earlier. And also, if you look at the background of the new inductees, those who come from outside, four of them being well-performed and very well-known bureaucrats. And I would go along with the BJP spokesperson's word that they've got talent available. What they don't have is an experience. So identifying the talent and giving them the right opportunities, what is needed in the country right now, because BJP being a fairly new party may not have people with experience to tout about it. So overall, if I had to talk about it, it's a very positive response from the industry. Then what we expected, or maybe the GDP number that he spoke about, is an outcome of a demonetization followed very quickly with the GST implementation. I would go along with the overall perspective of the industry that we are waiting for better days to be happening in the second half of the current year. And naturally, GST implementation had an impact in the last quarter's GDP number. And I don't think we should take cognizance of it. I would say that the way it is handled by the Prime Minister of selecting the right people for the right job, and things should be in a positive stride. I'm positive about it.
You're positive about it. So there's a note of optimism there coming in from Mr. Onikrishnan. Let me ask one question to Sunil Alag. I think he's also joining in to our discussion. He's joining in from our Mumbai studio. The emphasis this time around, Sunil, as far as this cabinet reshuffle was concerned, on the 4 Ps: progress, passion, proficiency, and professionalism. And the larger message that the Prime Minister wanted to send out was reward the performers, demote the underperformers. Has that message been sort of, is that message loud and clear?
Look, as far as industry is concerned, and I want to add, and I disagree with the gentleman, not on the industry part, but somebody from Business Standard who said that he's a little disappointed. Look, I don't know all the 9 who have been taken on, but every one of those 9, if you look at their history, are all doers. I don't think Mr. Modi is going to just get them on for cosmetic reasons. They have got between half of 17, 18 to perform and get the act together. Where is the government needing it now? They want to increase exports. They want to create jobs. They got to look after agriculture. And as far as they are concerned, none of this is happening in terms of law and order. So every one of those 9 have got an experience in each one of these fields. And to talk about whether at the top level is the ministry is getting or not, my reading is they'll all become ministers of state and they'll become more powerful than some of the ministers that they report into. So that is what I'm looking at, and I'm sure each person would have been asked by Mr. Modi, what is your area of passion, where can you perform, which is his style, and that's the ministry they'll go into. Whether it's Mr. Puri or whether it's Mr. Chaube or Shukla, all of them, there are some who are experienced in promoting the girl, in terms of going in for toilets, and therefore that is required. In terms of Mr. Hegde, I believe he's a taekwondo expert, 5 times he's been elected to the Lok Sabha, he's handled Spice Board. So I think more and more he will look after exports, but every single industry where, every single part that industry is looking forward to, I think these 9 guys are going to deliver. And I'm not worried about the ones who promoted, because they are promoted for performance and everything else. Right now, the rewarding for performance and not rewarding is history for Mr. Modi. He has to make sure during 18, everybody performs. And that's the situation that we are looking forward to. How does he change the GDP growth, take it up? And it's agriculture and exports and the creation of jobs. Just remember that every year, there are about 18 to 20 million people who cross the age of 18, okay, so they become voters. Now, if you look at his period, there'll be 100 million in 2019. And one of the aspirations of this 100 million is basically jobs, law and order, and corruption, nothing else. They are not carrying the old baggage of caste and, you know, all that religion and everything else. Now, he is aiming at the youth of India. He is asking for their aspirational levels, and that's the political answer that is going to be given to everybody in 2019. That's my only point.
Aiming at the youth of India with half our population under the age of 35. Salman, I saw your hands up. A quick reaction. After that, I'll go to Mr. Ajay Srivastava. Salman, quick response.
Look, I mean, I don't mind the corporate sector kind of trying to sing praises of Prime Minister Modi, because this is a very vindictive government. So I let them be. That's fine. But what is the bigger picture here? The bigger picture is that your economy. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay. You know, the bigger
can hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
That the economy is in a slump. It's not just the economic, the headline numbers, right? You know, look, for a long time now, we've had a massive problem in the banking sector. Your NPAs have been going up. There's not much credit going out. You have a huge problem on jobs. You're not investing. You don't have private sector investment. Your capacity utilization in manufacturing is about 71%. That is terrible, horrible, okay? I don't see any prospect under this government of any significant change, because they haven't shown anything. You know, I again tell you that Mr. Jaitley has managed, or at least tried to manage, the fiscal deficit and the public finances, talking about taxes, but he's not managed the economy. Because he's a part-time minister now. We've had a part-time defense minister. Sushma Swaraj, Taneja ji, I tell you, Sushma Swaraj ji has been insulted not by me, but by Mr. Modi, because he and Mr. Dowell do not let her do her job. Otherwise, she's a fine lady, but let's face it, everybody knows she has no policy role at the Ministry of External Affairs. So, one confession that I'd like to make as an opposition member. I think the way this government has been performing, basically, this total failure, in my opinion, total failure. They run the economy into the ground. The only thing that if the opposition, the Congress party and the opposition get together and put together a narrative which is an alternative, positive narrative, talk about our experience, talk about how inexperienced these people are. They're getting in bureaucrats now, but Mr. Modi has been running a one-man government.
But the narrative that you've been setting, Salman,
if we get our act together, if we get our act together, if we get our narrative right, alternative, positive narrative, Mr. Modi is in serious danger in 2019 or even in 2018 if he brings the elections forward. I tell you.
All right, Salman, let's just quickly get in a word also from Mr. Ajay Srivastav. How will the markets respond to this, if at all, on Monday morning, Ajay?
I wonder there's a much for the markets to respond because it's not a very big reshuffle. I think broadly everybody's in where they are, a few elevations and a few people who come in, and lots of them are the old administrators. So I think from a market perspective, if you look at it, not much has changed between between yesterday and Monday. And I think the biggest disappointment perhaps has been that the...
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? The disappointment has been that I think, Piyush Goyal has done a very wonderful job. I think Dharmesh Pradhan has done a decent job with petroleum. I would tend to believe that the disappointment was with the Commerce Ministry, where we had slacking export for last 3 years. It's not gone up. We are peak export for 320 billion. We are at 270 billion right now. The major sectors of export are in trouble. The local trade is in trouble. So my guess was that the commerce was one place where either there will be a ministry change or a minister change will take place in that. And because that's one of the weakest links in the whole economy. You know, there's no problem. The stock market is doing well. FDI is doing well. What's the problem? The problem is big export issues across all sectors. The problem is local trade, commerce. Problem is local manufacturing. And that comes in partly industry, partly commerce. I think that's where the disappointment was, that there should be some change there instead of a promotion, because that's not a very good job. Other guys have done a pretty decent job, so they got promoted. I think that's one. Number two is, if you look across the spectrum of people who come in, I think there is a political solution being found for an economic problem, which is the fact that, you know, the huge trading communities, the business communities, which are getting hurt by GST or demonetization. So you're bringing in political heavyweights to manage that, and lots of channels are talking about it as well. And I'm strange to find even caste equation being discussed even in today's India, but they are important, I guess. So I think two things. From the performance evaluation side, I think the most critical piece was Commerce Ministry, which was in fact elevated, not the one which is put to test. And the second was, I think by and large the other changes are not going to be anything earth-shattering from the market perspective or the economy.
Right, but you know, Ajay, I mean, you know, just to give the government's perspective as far as, you know, stagnating exports go, they've also been talking about how the fact that global trade, you know, around the world has been contracting. In fact, global GDP has been outpacing global trade growth for the past 5-6 years now. So in that sense, I mean, how valid is it to sort of, you know, put the entire blame on the Commerce Ministry for India's sluggish exports?
See, you know, it's not about putting the blame on somebody. The fact is that each minister is responsible for a certain segment. Do you think the power minister doesn't have challenges enough of the PLF, the Uday discount, etc.? So everybody's got challenges. What we've not seen is initiatives to do something about it. One is to passively accept what's happening and then let it roll out. Second is to actively fight it out and say, is there a way I can do something about it? Whether it's a pharma sector, your handicraft sector, your textile sector, those have been raking. And if you look at the new development under GST, they have been anti-exports by and large. You've got to pay duties and import, and you get refund later, and so on and so forth. So all those things put together tell you that this has been an inactive response to a market development. Nobody's doubting that globally this is a challenging environment and so on, which means you need to double your initiatives and not half it. So I think that's the one disappointment. Otherwise, I think it's by and large the status quo, few people coming in, good that few people have gone out. I think that will challenge others to believe that they don't have a secure job at least, or maybe they believe now that with 2 years left to go, they all have a secure job. I don't know that, but it's a good message, no doubt. But I think a little more radical stuff on this sector, and two other sectors was health and education. No one will doubt that I think these two sectors have not done the best in the last 3 years. They should have given a lot more vitality. Maybe the ministers will change, I'm not sure, but that is two sectors which definitely need some major input, because these are the lagging sectors which are hurting the Indian economy on the social side.
All right, I'll go to one more guest before we quickly slip into another break. We have Shailesh Kumar also joining in on the phone line. Shailesh, you know, the larger point that Ajay was making, that perhaps, you know, I mean, largely the cabinet reshuffle has been on expected lines where the performers have been rewarded. But in some cases, perhaps the Prime Minister should have taken a more sort of a, should have been a little more strict, especially when it comes on the export front with the Ministry of Commerce. Are you largely sort of, satisfied where the performers have indeed been sort of rewarded, and those people who have not performed have been demoted? We've seen 5 or 6 resignations over the last 2 days.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think well, first it's a little challenging to know exactly because we still don't know who's going to be situated where. So when we know exactly who, for example, if there is a new commerce minister, who that'll be, or for example, if the finance ministry, if we have a new finance minister, which seems unlikely right now. So once we have those answers settled, I think we'll have a better idea as to whether people are actually being rewarded or not. Right. On the point about exports and what can the commerce ministry really do, I mean, I couldn't hear Ajay's comments fully, but my views on this are that I'm pretty sympathetic to the government argument about global demand. I mean, the global economy is not as healthy as people may be giving it credit for. Demand is simply not there. And from a political standpoint, the whole free trade environment is just simply not there. And the appetite for demand for goods, for exports, for particularly from Asia is simply not there either. So I'm not entirely sure what the Commerce Ministry could be doing in this environment to boost exports further. But with that said, I am also cognizant of the criticism of the current minister. I mean, she in some situations has not been a very, let's say, friendly advocate for multilateral engagement. And you can argue that, well, she's standing up for India's rights, and that's completely fine and healthy. But at the same time, there is something to be said about maybe pushing forward certain agenda items. I'm not giving specifics here, but just in generality.
Yeah, fair enough. But Shailesh, has your view of the Indian economy changed since the first quarter GDP numbers came in 5.7%? Because because now pretty much every brokerage house are revising, with a lower bias as far as what the GDP would be for the full year. Has your view of the Indian economy changed since the numbers came out?
So we tend to look at it in a much more macro perspective. So we obviously don't do quarterly or even annual GDP forecasts. But what we do is kind of long-term trajectories and how health of the economy and the political environment. And from that perspective, the answer is no. And the reason I'm going to say no is because the underpinnings of the economy are still quite strong. What I've always maintained is that there's really 2 drivers for economic growth in India right now. The first is foreign direct investments, and the second is government capex. Right. As we said, exports are weak, private consumption is okay, and domestic investments in India are actually not doing too well at all. But that story hasn't changed, and that story has been the same thing for the past 2 to 3 years now. So going forward, I don't see that changing either, but I do see foreign direct investments continuing to stay high, and I do see government capex actually increasing because of the fact that revenues are coming up.
Line. But let's quickly slip into a break on our special coverage this Sunday morning, where Prime Minister Modi has rejuvenated his Council of Ministers. Is this Prime Minister Modi's A-team, as he is all set for the 2019 elections? Our conversation with a whole host of guests from diverse sectors and industries continues when we return. Don't go anywhere. Good morning and welcome back to our special coverage. We are still waiting for the announcement of which minister gets which portfolio. But one breaking news, and this is a confirmation clearly now. Suresh Prabhu has tweeted, he said that he's thanking all the 13 lakh families associated with the railways. And he says that he will always cherish these memories and wishing all of them a great life. Salman, let's get a quick reaction. So this is clear now that Suresh Prabhu will no longer be the railway minister. It wasn't expected lines, but then, Prime Minister Modi had asked him to wait. So there was speculation that who knows, he might just come back, especially because, he knows the sector now inside out. But Congress has been gunning for his resignation right from the time we've had a spate of rail accidents. Your response to that, Salman?
Well, accidents are clearly an important factor, no doubt about it. And, I really feel that the ministry and, there was a lot of focus on making big promises. They were talking about operating ratios to be brought under control, and they were talking about how they would, eliminate, railway accidents and all that. They did not deliver on either count. They mismanaged the financial aspects, and they actually did not do well on the safety part. And, you have to take responsibility. But, I must say that at least somebody's taking responsibility. But, but you know it, I know it, other panelists on this show know it, and people of India know it. For the most part, this is a one-man government, and that is, the government is run primarily by Prime Minister Modi, except for a few ministers here and there. And when he is going to take responsibility is anybody's guess.
All right, Salman, let's also get in Ajay Srivastav also to talk about the development. So, Ajay, at least we now know that Suresh Prabhu in all likelihood will not be the railway minister, going by the tweet he has put out. So tell us, who, because now the name that is doing the rounds is that of our power minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal. And in fact, some channels are also saying that it's confirmed that Piyush Goyal will be taking charge as a railway minister. If that does indeed happen, there are a lot of railway stocks to watch out for, a lot of wagon companies listed on the Bombay Stock Exchange and the National Stock Exchange. Would that infuse infuse some energy in those stocks if Piyush Goyal does indeed take charge of the rail ministry?
I think it will. I think if Piyush Goyal is appointed the railway minister, it would be a great move, because I think the guy, one, comes from a finance background, so understands a little bit more than other ministers, and number two is he comes from a background of having performed and the confidence with which he can take some decision or force them down. I don't think Suresh Prabhu had literally the verve to take a huge organization into a different orbit. Piyush Goyal has done it with the power sector, with the coal sector. To that extent, it will be a positive. But let me tell the stock market side that yes, there will be an uplift of the stocks on the side that privatization will be order of the day, and you'll see more orders coming. But that happens with every real budget also with these stocks. So don't get carried away with these stocks, because these stocks have not performed in the last 5 years. They're not going to perform in the next 3 years. There is lots of money to be found, and the period for that is long. The railway procurement system is pretty long. So don't get too excited with the stocks per se, by and large. For the country, it's a good development if that happens. But you might see a pop-up on the stock, so enjoy the pop-up ride. But there's no fundamental change in the way, because they need money to buy equipment. They need money to buy rolling stock. Whether it's the wagons, signaling equipment, etc. The other kind of companies are listed there. All the companies are basically small and medium kind of companies in this market. So the point is that whether they'll have such a big run-up in the next 12 months, I doubt it. So if you can buy it for a pop-up and sell out, trade out, is good for you. But don't buy that investment because this is going to take a long while.
All right, Ajay. Shaina NC, BJP spokesperson, also joining in. Thanks very much, ma'am, joining us this morning. Tell us, what's the larger message Prime Minister Modi, Party President Amit Shah is trying to send out with this cabinet reshuffle?
First and foremost, you must understand that our Prime Minister leads by example. He believes in the mantra of perform or perish. You have seen performing ministers who have been given a larger mandate and an opportunity. You have seen a case where the only incentive for the government of the day is to see delivery. So if you take, for example, Piyush Goyal as power minister, the fact that he connected village after village that were not even electrified for centuries, he is a performer. And I'm glad that from what one has understood through your channel, there is a larger mandate in space for him. When it comes to others who are the new entrants, also please do understand there are a lot who have a professional background, whether it's from the services or the police force. And I'm sure that in the days to come, they will also lead individual ministries with only one mantra, which is taking India forward, because Prime Minister Modi is extremely clear that his agenda is development for India, inclusive India, and not getting into single commentaries over issues and controversies, but rather focusing on what India really needs in each of these sectors.
Shaina, you actually preempted my question, because I was going to ask you, how should we read the induction of people, individuals, with like illustrious services background, whether it's IAS, IFS, IPS, in this Council of Ministers? Help us understand, how should we read it? What is the message that the Prime Minister is trying to send out, maybe to some of his existing ministers, that why we have chosen individuals from the services?
I think it's a fantastic initiative, or rather thought process of our Prime Minister and our party president, because our only agenda is development and our only agenda is getting the job done. Now, if you have people from within the system, bureaucrats who have worked with, several ministers and several, departments, it's only that much easier and faster to understand the process. I think we must understand that in 2022, the Prime Minister has talked about India, which has electricity in every part, and India, which is connected by rail and road and transport, being a core issue. So infrastructure being something that he is very, very bullish about, and connectivity of even areas like the Northeast, which have not been taken into consideration in the past. So I think that if you have bureaucrats, if you have people who have worked with the administration, for them to execute is going to be a welcome change in public life and polity. And for those in politics who thought that, their family fiefdom could last them forever and ever, it isn't in the 21st century. So as a young leader of this party, I think it's a welcome change. It's something that we look up to the Prime Minister for, because he really believes in the mantra of perform or perish.
So shape up or ship out is the message that, according to Shaina, the Prime Minister is trying to send out. Shaina, thanks very much for joining in on our special broadcast. Shailesh, come in. We lost the line with you the last time we were speaking. We couldn't hear you clearly. But, but tell us, with this government focusing a lot on the fundamentals, trying to change the way governance, in a sense, in India is sort of performed. Has your impression of the Indian economy changed in the last 3 years since this government has come to power? And you were also making a larger point about how how your agency views the Indian economy for the long term.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me properly
Loud and
now.
clear,
But
Shailesh, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Just to reiterate what I was saying earlier was that the economy is really being driven by two factors. One is government spending, and the second is foreign direct investments. And that's because, as we know, the domestic private investment story is still pretty bad. Consumption is okay, and the export market is not that great, and that's a bigger issue that we already talked about. But on the points about government spending, yes, we do see a big change, because in the past 2 or 3 budgets, definitely the last 2 budgets, and specifically the last budget, you're seeing a massive emphasis on public capex, specifically on infrastructure. The number is something like $60 billion on infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Next year's budget will probably be even more, because we are anticipating a revenue pickup because of GST and because of front loading of taxes from demonetization. Mm-hmm. So for those 2 reasons, there is a massive reorientation. Now, you can call this a pivot in terms of ideology, but you can also say that the government recognizes that with the lack of other growth areas, that they need to spend a lot of money. This is fiscal stimulus one way or another. Mm-hmm. And so that's where you're seeing the emphasis. And I'm also seeing a general change. Now, you were mentioning earlier about why are they inducting more service-oriented ministers, and I think that's part of it, which is you're bringing in a group of individuals who are less political and more have an understanding of how the civil service operates, how policy is made, and how to push forward new ideas. Now, that doesn't mean things are going to change immediately, mm-hmm. but at the very least, you're seeing this more technocratic shift. Mm-hmm. The second point to that is, by omitting politicians, there's 2 consequences, there are 2 issues. One is maybe there's just not enough of a bench, mm-hmm. so they're forced to go to the services route. Mm-hmm. But second, by holding back on the politicians, we've seen this trend. We've seen the Prime Minister do this in the past, where he's intentionally bypassed ministers in some cases and advanced the secretaries. For example, the Home Secretary or the Finance Secretary or the Foreign Secretary, and he works more closely with them to further his agenda. So I think this is a very intentional change you've seen with this government in the past couple of years. So yes, I would say that there are some changes. And on the economic side, there's some drags on the economy, and they're trying to work around, and there's a lot more they could be doing. But given the constraints, the things I would keep focusing on is government spending. I mean, that's going to be the emerging story here as far as what takes the economy forward.
Yes, absolutely. And the public investment we've seen going up, but in a country where still 75–80% of investments are led by the private sector, many would say there's only that much that the public sector can do in terms of compensating for the lack of private sector investments, or not enough private sector investments. Time for us to slip into another break on our special broadcast here on CNBC TV 18 as we patiently wait for the final allocation of portfolios to our ministers. Stay tuned. Our coverage continues on the other side. Welcome back to our special broadcast this Sunday morning here on CNBC TV 18. We're still waiting the final allocation of portfolios. We have 10 minutes left on our special broadcast, so let's quickly get and wrap up comments from all our guests who've been patiently waiting for us. Salman Soz, let me start with you. You talked about the need for Congress to have, to come up with a new narrative and whereby you will pose a serious challenge to the BJP in 2019. We had Kapil Sibal on our channel on Friday, and he said there is a need for Congress as well to introspect. What can we expect from the Congress going forward?
Just before that, let me just quickly, there was a point about FDI. First of all, there was a point about the Prime Minister's, focus on performance that China talked about. Frankly, the Prime Minister should look himself in the mirror, and then he'll see what performance his has been, and then he can, propound on the performance of other people. Second, on FDI, on public spending for capital expenditures. Let's face it, FDI has been between 2 to 3% of GDP for the last 15 years or so. That's what the range is. Whereas the overall investment ratio in this country has fluctuated from 25% to almost 40%, and 25% from Mr. Vajpayee's time. So, we have to focus on domestic investment, and that will not turn around unless you resolve the banking sector's crisis. The banking sector is the lifeblood of the economy. without focusing on that. They wasted 3.5 years without doing anything serious on that. You will not have a pickup in the economy if you do not address these fundamental issues. The private sector is not going to be able to come in. And by the way, this whole idea that we're going to collect a lot of taxes is going to somehow improve the economy, no. You grow the economy and then your taxes come up. You know, the informal sector is devastated. How else do we explain it? We've been talking about this for a while. The informal sector and the formal sector, they're linked. There is no hard boundaries, you know, because once you have a vibrant informal sector, that feeds into the formal sector. So I think this regimentation is wrong. The government has not really fully understood this. Perhaps Mr. Jaitley is a lawyer.
What do we expect from Congress, Salman?
Now
Fair
on
enough.
the Congress,
Quickly.
on the Congress Party, on the Congress Party, I think our hope is that our leadership will see, and I think they are. Everybody is. That the economy is in deep trouble. There are no jobs and people are suffering. The poor people are suffering. Okay. So I think we need to address these concerns. We have lots of 65% of your population is below 35, and the number of people coming into the job market, it's a tsunami of people, young people. And we need to be able to tell them that we have the experience. We have done this before, and we will move this country in the right direction. And that is the job of our leadership, the leadership of the other opposition parties as well.
All right. Last word to Mr. Unni Krishnan. Give us a corporate response to this. You know, the Congress spokesperson laying out very clearly that, you know, private sector is not investing, and which is, of course, a fact. What do we expect? Do we see, I mean, is there enough evidence on the ground for the private sector to start investing once again? Mr. Unni Krishnan.
We are already investing in some of the sectors which are purely consumption oriented. You would see a lot of investment happening in food processing, alcohol, beverages, pharma, textiles, light engineering, automobiles. But this, the ticket size of these investments are fairly small, maybe a 500 crore to 1,000 crore. What we are lacking currently is the capacity utilization lacking behind in cement, steel, petroleum products, oil and gas, fertilizer. These are the core industries which are not investing because the capacity utilization is hovering between 65 to 75%. Unless it catches up to a level of maybe an 85 plus, where there is an investment climate prevailing, I don't see any revival of the core sector going to happen. And I'm willing to give maybe a couple of more years. But I want to make a comment over here. Listening to everybody so far, more political in nature. Well, the malady for the Indian economic system has started happening quite some time back. And what has happened in the recent past, the new government coming in, I'm not a spokesperson for a BJP as a party, but actively involved in the industrial organizations and associations. We've seen a lot of positive movement happening in the recent past at the central level, in some states also. Fundamentally, in a federal system like India, the real happenings are in the state level. Unless we are able to translate what has happened in Delhi to the state capitals and to maybe the district capitals, we won't be able to transform India. But I'm a very positive person, and I'm very confident things are happening in the positive direction in Delhi. And with the current cabinet reshuffle, one more message is gone, that every minister, you are not indispensable. Unlike in the earlier past, it's a politicking which decided who's going to become the minister. We're not politicking at all. And I'm making a very bold statement. In the current change, I can see there were no politicking in selecting ministers, promoting them, discarding them. If we are able to continue on this path, India is on the right path. Industry will continue to be investing based on the demand. It has nothing to do with politics. If we are able to sell our wares, if there's the demand for our wares, we'll continue to be investing. There's no dearth for money in this country.
Okay, Mr. Unni Krishnan, I'll request all our guests to hold on for a little while longer, because we are told that the portfolio allocation that we've all been patiently waiting for will come out any minute. But let me come to you, Ajay Srivastava, because what we now know from sources is that it is pretty much confirmed now that Finance Minister Arun Jaitley will continue to hold both the portfolios of Finance Ministry as well as Defence Ministry. One would say it's a bit surprising because Arun Jaitley himself publicly said that he hoped to be relieved of his Defence Ministry portfolio. Now, he's going to be managing both these at a time when, you know, when many would say the economy will require his undivided attention. But on the other hand, even the defence sector, there are a lot of risks, there are a lot of border tussles that we are seeing. And at a time when the government is also trying to open up the private sector for more defence participation. How do you read Arun Jaitley continuing to hold on to the two hats. So he's no more the night watchman. That's what we all thought, that it's a temporary position. It seems that as of now, perhaps till 2019, Arun Jaitley will continue to head both the portfolios of Defence Ministry and Finance. How should we read this, Ajay?
I think it's a little disappointing because that obviously is the two biggest ministries of any government and it needs the full-time attention of both of them. But my guess is that the logic been driven here is that the army and the defense forces have a huge problem of procurement. That process has got stalled over the last few years and indigenization has been a failure. I think there's somewhere down the line, they want Arun Jaitley's experience to come onto the board, that how do we work the strategic contracts, how do we do with the procurement, clean procurement, and how do we get this whole thing moving, because that's the biggest thing ailing. On the defense narrative in terms of the defense policy and defense initiatives, I think the policy has been more with the Prime Minister and Mr. Doval than with the Defense Minister. Defense Minister has more been an administrative persona by and large, it's not been a policy-making persona. So my guess is that they want that experience of Mr. Jaitley from finance to transcend to defense, to ensure that procurement, link up with Indian corporate sector, the import substitution which is we're talking about, or contracts, those go through in a fast-paced manner, and that's why they want the finance ministry linkage to continue at the top level, because anybody coming new into the defense ministry job would find it very difficult to get money out of finance ministry, get his contracts approved, and get things moving. That would be perhaps the driving, and I don't think it's such a bad decision, because any case, the policy of defense, what to take, what view to do in Doklam, etc., is not necessarily the prerogative of the defense ministry, is being taken care of by the PMO. So there is a clear divided responsibility. So I'm not too bad, but I think what's good about it, if it continues is, and from a stock market perspective is, you will find a lot more traction for companies like Tata Power, which has got defense contracts, or even the other companies which are looking at L&T, etc., for defense contracts. I think that's the one which will gain if we have a common head across finance ministry and defense for the time being, without compromising our preparedness for defense. I think that's a good in my way. It continues. It puts a lot of burden. I would say it's not ordinarily true, but given the situation we are in, perhaps that's the best solution.
You're making some great points there, Ajay. Shailesh, come in on that. At a time when the Indian economy is facing some serious challenges, now, the news that's coming in is that our Finance Minister, Mr. Arun Jaitley, will be heading both the portfolios of finance and defense. Looking at the Indian economy from a dispassionate perspective, with the benefit from, looking at the Indian economy from the outside, how do you see one man heading both these two crucial portfolios, and what ramifications, if any, there could be on, on the Indian economy?
Sure, I think I may end up echoing some of the things Ajay said. So at initial glances, this is not a good sign in general, because these are two very key portfolios that one individual should not be running theoretically. They're both extremely sensitive, and on paper at least they're completely opposites in terms of what type of skill set is required to properly run them. I think most investors, when they look at India, they often ask, why is Arun Jaitley running both finance and defense? Is he just on one area, and if not, what does that mean? But on the other hand, I can see some values as far as why. The first is defense is an extremely sensitive portfolio, so I would imagine the Prime Minister wants somebody heading it who he can trust. Second is you have a very competent defense secretary underneath of him, who I think most people respect and say that he's doing a good job in running it. Third, on the more economic policy side, Make in India, Make in India was obviously one of the flagship ideas, and it's now being pivoted more towards the defense procurement, or having more companies make in India in the defense sector. So if you combine the finance brains with the defense brains on this, and you say Make in India needs to be more geared towards defense, then it makes a lot more sense to have one person running both. And then fourth, as Ajay mentioned also, that Doklam and other issues are being more and more sorted out by the Foreign Secretary and by the National Security Advisor and the PMO directly. So these are less and less focused on Defense Minister himself. Right. So yes, there's four reasons as to why this makes sense. But again, those are very nuanced reasons. Yeah. At first glance, when most foreign investors look at this, though, they don't look at those issues. They look more as to why is one individual running both of these very important ministries, and is he able to allocate enough time to both of them? No, indeed, two crucial portfolios. Gentlemen, stay with us. Our coverage on the other side continues. Hopefully by then we'll have some more information, and officially we would know who's getting which portfolio. We'd love to get your reactions on that, so just stay patient with us for another few minutes. Let's quickly slip into a break. Our coverage continues.
Well, thanks very much once again for joining in this Monday afternoon. Now it is. We've been live since morning on this big cabinet reshuffle. The information so far is that the top 4 positions of finance, defense, home, external affairs, we are unlikely to see any change on that front. As I said, these are all source-based information. Still awaiting patiently for government's official announcement on what the cabinet portfolios would look like going forward. We are expected, though that announcement is expected any minute now. But let's also get in Mr. Unnikrishnan. He's been with us right from the time we've been broadcasting live. Mr. Unnikrishnan, now it's pretty much clear now, as per the information that's available right now. We must caveat, these are guesstimates, but it's quite clear, it seems, that Piyush Goyal will be now moving on from as the Minister of Coal and Power and Renewable Energy. How big a setback do you think it would be for the ministry, especially at a time when when the Uday scheme is just about taking shape? There are many states where we are still seeing what the impact of the Uday scheme would be. He's also spearheading the government's renewable energy strategy. He's spearheading the electric mobility strategy. So how big a setback do you think it would be for those ambitions that Piyush Goyal had said as the coal, power and renewable energy? Now that it seems all clear, he's going to move away and maybe take up and become India's next railway minister.
It will be a major loss for all the ministries put together, and it will depend a lot more on who's going to come in his place as a replacement. If you have to get a professional like Mr. Piyush Goyal, who understands how things are moved, both politically as well as in the administrative sector, I think it may not be such a major setback, because whatever is said and done, on the power side, we've almost completed a lot more of the initiatives. Solar prices almost come down to a level where it can't come any further down. Electricity, thermal generation is, in current understanding, is at almost a peak level where our deficit has come down, peak deficit has come down. So there is room available for some more time for it to be on its own inertia moving. But I'll be really concerned about the electric vehicle movement, which the PM has personally given to him and he had been spearheading, where we are not ready with the policy so far. And if you're going to look at, in the last 1 year, the number of electric vehicles in the world has gone from 1 million to 2 million. And in that, almost 35% has come in one country known as China. And India is going to catch up with that, because we are also a coal-based economy, to move away from oil and gas and fossil fuel into electric. So there, I would feel a gap is going to be much wider. That's point number 1. And I would believe that railways could have been managed by any minister. And blaming Mr. Prabhu for all the lineup of accidents, I think Prabhu has done a fairly good job in empowering and corporatizing the entire railway ministry, which is more political in nature for the past maybe 70 years of post-independence. First time we had a well-meaning person over there, and sacrificing, well, politically there's no other choice for the country. And moving somebody as good as Piyush Goyal into a ministry equivalent to that, I don't know is the right decision for the country, but of course all of us will have to go ahead with that. He may be able to set up the things right, but is that going to make a difference for the country beyond a level? Whereas in the other area which he was managing together, put together MNRE, coal, because we have not spoken about coal ministry, and also the power, and possibly at some point of time combining oil and gas with that as an energy ministry is what all of us are expecting. And I would have looked up to him as a prospective minister to manage the entire energy future of the country. So there is a setback in that particular area.
Right. No, fair points there, Mr. Unnikrishnan. Ajay, comment on that. I mean, Mr. Piyush Goyal has had a good performance as the coal power, renewable energy, spearheading several initiatives. Uday scheme, to begin with, has been a landmark sort of policy move by the government to address the ailing concerns, to address the concerns of the ailing discoms. Now with Piyush Goyal all set to go to the railways, I remember a guest we had on our show, he called railways the den of vipers, is what she said. How challenging will it be for Piyush Goyal to try and revitalize and also carry forward some of the good work, one would have to say, that that Suresh Prabhu initiated in railways?
See, first the issue is leadership. Leadership is half the battle won. Today, when he walks into if he does walk into the railway ministry, people see a strong performer coming into the ministry. Prabhu did not have the background. He made so many tall promises, didn't fulfill even 1/10 of what he was supposed to be talking about in the last 3 years. So to the extent the fact that the leadership inspires confidence, I don't think he had the confidence of either his people or anybody else in the country to say, can he deliver railways? Piyush Goyal walks in and says, I have the confidence, I have the ear of the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, I just got promoted, I did a good job with the Power Ministry, therefore listen to me, I may have some ideas which can turn this railways around. I think that's half the battle won to my mind. The rest is mechanics of running an organization which has its own pulls and pressures of which for instance, the Petroleum Ministry has the same issues of subsidy versus non-subsidy, and they have tackled it, whether we like it or not. The prices are the highest ever in the history of India, and oil, when the oil prices are 50, we are at 67, 72 rupees petrol prices. Is that a good deal? Maybe not, but it's been done and dusted. So here is a situation where this guy walks in and says, okay, I've done this in the power industry. Power Ministry by and large today has one big challenge, which is overcapacity and oversupply. It's not a challenge of shortages anymore. Nobody's saying that we'll run out of power for the next 3 to 5 years, and what needs to be done is someone to just come in and handhold the about 30 gigawatts of power which is lying locked in today with plants not working. That's the challenge today in the Power Ministry. So not such a great challenge. Coal India is not able to produce, people can't lift enough. The new coal plants haven't started. So, let's not pass a judgment that the new coal auctions did a great job, because nothing happened in those auctions. By and large, those plants are still to run. So Power Ministry, I think, is now in auto mode where things are okay, things are stabilized. And that's why I said, when he walks into the railways, he can get money out of the Finance Ministry, he can have the confidence of the Prime Minister's ear, he can get changes done, which I guess Mr. Prabhu did not have the wherewithal or the political power or the performance background to get it done. So I think it's all about leadership, and a good strong leader can do wonders with this organization called Railways. It may be den of vipers, so be it, but we do run the largest network of rail in this country. We transport goods, and believe me, I'm in a business, number of invested companies. The railway goods system does work well. It just comes in 2 to 3 days. The economics of the railways is a problem which I think someone from finance like Piyush Goyal can sort it out.
Indeed, indeed. Shailesh, final words to you then. How do you see Piyush Goyal's possible appointment as the railway minister? Because, it seems from, I think for me, the big takeaway really is Piyush Goyal. He's now been elevated to the position of cabinet rank, but the fact that he is now, in all likelihood, going to get the railway ministry clearly illustrates the kind of confidence the Prime Minister has in Piyush Goyal's ability to sort of, infuse, revitalize the railways at a time when sentiments are perhaps very, very low because of the spate of accidents we've seen. So any comments on that?
Yeah, sure. So even as of a year ago or 18 months ago, I was saying that Piyush Goyal he should be elevated given what he's done in the power sector. Obviously, at that time, the counter-argument was that, and the counter-argument was he's too junior as a politician, he needs some time, but clearly that has now dispelled, and the Prime Minister has a lot of confidence in him. As far as, is he going to be missed? He'll definitely be missed in the power area, but we have to look at this in the prism of 2019. I mean, this whole cabinet reshuffle may be the last one till then, and is all done for 2019. And rail is an area that, from a marketing perspective, if you're going to run a campaign, you have to show that, A, the accidents are behind you, and B, that there's actually some good momentum taking place. I was just at the rail ministry last week, and the work that's been going on has been fine, happened under Prabhu, but it's largely now on auto drive. In other words, a lot of the projects are up and running, or they're already being implemented. Some of the projects are bid out, and that's going to happen by the end of the year. So at this point, it's a matter of making sure, A, those you accelerate on the further development. So if you have the freight corridors up and running by 2019 or close to 2019, you can accelerate the passenger speed, you can decongest the network, and you can also improve safety. Then those are all good areas to work on. Now maybe now with Goyal, you're going to be able to get that taken care of. So it is almost a win-win. Yes, there's some negatives because he's going away from this important power area, but that's on auto drive. Now it's a matter of just taking the rail into a new direction so that from a marketing perspective for 2019, you can show that you're actually doing good work in this area. That's very sensitive, and that matters a lot to a lot of voters.
All right, Shailesh, many thanks, and really thanks to all our guests, Mr. Salman Soz, Yogendra Yadav, Narendra Taneja, the first BJP spokesperson to actually come on any channel with their response to the cabinet reshuffle, Mr. Onni Krishnan, Mr. AKB, Mr. Ajay Srivastav, Sunil Alak. Thank you all for patiently sitting with us as we dissected what this cabinet reshuffle would mean for all our viewers who are joining in just right now. 9 new ministers, individuals have been inducted into the Council of Ministers. 4 incumbents. That's Mr. Piyush Goyal, Dharmendra Pradhan, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman and Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi. They've got cabinet ranks. In all likelihood, the buzzers, there is unlikely to be any change as far as the top 4 portfolios are concerned. So Mr. Arun Jaitley, in all likelihood, will continue with his dual portfolio. That is one of, as the Minister of Finance and Minister of Defense. And the big headline as we are getting at this point, again, still source based, unfortunately. We hope that the government makes it official soon, is that Piyush Goyal, in all likelihood, is going to be India's next railway minister. What is confirmed is that Suresh Prabhu has resigned, because we've seen his tweet thanking all the people in the railways for being a big source of support for him. So that's the latest as far as Narendra Modi government's attempts to rejuvenate, revitalize his government ahead of the 2019 elections. Our live coverage will continue here on CNBC TV 18. Let's slip into a short break. Please don't go anywhere.